Welcome to The Ripple, where extraordinary women executives share their turning points, growing pains, breakthroughs, and triumphs to help you show up with confidence. I'm your host, Ashley Lobbs, and today we're joined by the vibrant Brandi Starr, COO at Tegrita. She's named one of the top 50 women in MarTech, and she's the co-author of CMO to CRO, The Revenue Takeover by the Next Generation Executive. Brandi joins us to share how one piece of advice changed the trajectory of her career. Brandi, thank you so much for being
Thank you
here.
for having me. I am excited.
I want to hear a little bit about the work that you're doing and what excites you about it.
So, I am in email marketing, which by itself,
Mm.
email does not sound that thrilling. But what excites me is we work with all sorts of different companies, mainly mid market and enterprise organizations, in order to be able to craft the communication journey and to help them figure out how to best leverage email as a tactic to drive revenue, drive velocity, and also to retain revenue. I love to see just the real power of how something that, we all use every day, which is email, can be so impactful and really help to pull together everything else. So every client that I work with generally starts with some basic newsletter and things running in their email. And by the time we work through what should be there, how does it connect to other tactics, it is like this well orchestrated machine. And so seeing how
Mm.
all the pieces fit together and how that really does impact revenue positively, that always makes me feel really excited.
I love that. And it's so true that there's just often this one thing that brings everything else into focus, that suddenly the system is complete and everything makes sense?
Yes. And that is exactly it for me.
I know that you wanted to share a story with us about advice that changed your trajectory, that brought everything together for you. What was that thing?
Yes. So many, many moons ago, early in my career, I had started a role as a marketing manager. And on my first day, there was a situation, and I ended up starting on a day that my boss was out of the office. And so his counterpart helped, get me set up. She, took me to my cube, got me to orientation, all these sorts of things. My boss comes back 3 days later and he comes over to me and he's like, "Why are you sitting out here?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "You should be in an office." And I was like, "Well, this is, what I was shown, that was told this was my desk." And he was like, "No, no, I put in that you should be in an office. Like, let me figure this out." I had never had an office before, never knew it was a big deal. And he was like, "No, no, I put in that you should be in an office. Like, let me figure this out." I had never had an office before, never knew it was a big deal. No need to ruffle anybody's feathers. And he's like, "No, this is important." So we go into his office and is really, up in arms about this situation. And so he pulled me in and he was like, "Look, you deserve to be in an office based on your experience. This is what you deserve. And I know how that team, which was the people that I was sitting around, he was like, I know how they operate. And they sit around and laugh and joke and cackle all day long. And there's not the same seriousness in that department as what we have to accomplish. I don't want you to be distracted. I'm going to fix this, by next week, we'll get you in the right place." So I went back to my desk, is what it is. And throughout the next few days, I kind of heard different, whisperings and grumblings of, I guess it started to circulate that I was being moved into this office, essentially in between two directors. And so I kept, hearing all the psh, 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 like, how you, like, back when we were all in an office, you hear the
Oh, yeah.
and so then, the day he's like, "Yes, this is your office. This is what I asked for." He comes and he's helping me move my stuff. And after I get settled, I went down to his office and I was feeling a little uncomfortable. Maybe I should just go back to the cube. Apparently, everybody else in that cube bank has the same title as me. They're just in different departments. And it seems like it's ruffling feathers that now I'm the one with an office. And he was like, "Close the door." And so I closed the door, I sat down, and he gives me this whole spiel. And the advice within that spiel was don't be afraid to ruffle feathers. He was like, "You have to be confident in your skills, in your ability, in the value that you bring to the organization. You have to be comfortable in that. Sometimes that means you're gonna receive things that others don't, or you're gonna be treated differently in a positive way, or you're gonna have ideas that, go against the grain. You've gotta be comfortable in pushing for what you know to be right and what you know to be best and what your ideas are, in order to get your point across." He was like, "You're a woman. And on top of that, you're a Black woman. So you already have a lot, stacked against you in people not necessarily taking you seriously or respecting your opinion. Don't be afraid to ruffle feathers." And that one conversation changed the trajectory of my career because from that point forward, I've not been afraid to ruffle feathers. And I am the one in meetings and with my clients, and even when I was on the client side, who will speak up and say the things that people are thinking, or say the things that make a situation uncomfortable, or make a recommendation that I know is best for the business, even if it's not going to make everybody happy, or show up, as my big personality and, when everybody's got on all black, I'm the one that shows up in, orange because that's who I am. It was like he gave me the freedom to not care what people thought in the workplace and just do good work and push for what I cared about and what I felt was right and important. And that has taken me a long way since then.
That's such a powerful lesson, and I'm sure that your ability to share your strong opinions, share your big ideas, is something that people really value you for, but it's hard to remember that something as trivial as where you sit will ruffle feathers,
Yes.
right? And even when it's something as insignificant as that, like it's important, for you to have the right kind of space to get your work done. Everybody deserves that. But in the context of what we're there to do, where you sit is not that important, but it can be that first impression that makes you not wanna ruffle feathers, and then you don't wanna ruffle feathers on the important stuff either. So, it's actually such a wonderful thing that your boss took you aside and said, "Hey, this is just the first of many times that
Yes.
you're gonna be making some people upset, and you may as well get used to it."
Yeah, it was awesome that that happened right at the beginning of my tenure there. I was brought in because things weren't working in that department. And, when things aren't working, that's where there's tough decisions, there's change, and change is always uncomfortable. And, I had come from other industries. So I was new in this it was like financial services. So new conservative industry. And so me pushing for things that were different or, that cost more or that were outside of the typical things that they do, all of those things were hard. And also, I think the other piece of it was knowing that I had a manager that had my back made it easier for me to be able to not be afraid to ruffle feathers because, and I wasn't out there picking fights or, doing anything like proceeding with my ego or, it was like none of that. It all was very genuine and about the work and what I believed was right. And so I always felt that I could stand in that and be confident in that because I also knew I had leadership behind me, backing me up. Now that I am in an executive role, I internalize that same advice in a different way in trying to be that kind of person that he was for me, that my team knows I've got their back. And they know that they too cannot be afraid of ruffling feathers because they do have the support. And so the advice really has changed me in two different stages. One, in how I proceeded through my career, and now as a leader in how I think about how I show up for my team. I wanna make sure that we don't have offices because 'cause we're completely virtual, but, using that same, analogy, I wanna make sure that if my people deserve an office, that I'm pushing for that office. I'm very, very thankful for a lot of the managers that I had early in my career because I had lots of lessons like that.
It's such a great reminder that people pleasing is sort of at odds with being a good leader. if you're so worried about ruffling feathers or offending people or not getting it right, that you step out of your role as leader to accommodate everybody else, it's a total disservice to
Yeah.
everyone. You have to get used to ruffling people's feathers, but you still have to care,
Yes.
right? You still have to care what they think. You can't it's not as simple as being like, "I'm ruffling feathers, I don't care what you have to say about it, I'm walking away, I'm doing what I want." So how do you balance that?
The balance is always checking in with myself as to why am I pushing for this? Because I never wanna be pushing for something because it's best for me or just because it was my idea or ego or any of those things, because, yes, that is someone who just stirs the pot and makes conflict, and that is not me. A lot of times with my clients, it is, "This is what I genuinely feel is going to make the big difference in your business." And so in that case, I'm willing to push for it. I'm willing to, battle out the ideas to help you see that this is the way forward. Or, whatever it is, I make sure that my head and heart are in the right place as to why I'm pushing for whatever. And there are times where I'll do that self reflection and I'm like, oh, like, I want that because the other thing makes me uncomfortable, or I've got some fear, or I mean, because, we're all human. And so in those cases, that's when I know, okay, step back, sit down. This is not a place that you should push hard. And I also recognize when to let go, because there are, in that case, I got my office, so to speak. But there are times where you may push for what you believe in, and you've either gotta completely back down or find a way to compromise so that there is a way forward. So there is a lot of self-awareness and mindfulness that has to come along with that behavior, but it is really what you said, letting go of that people-pleasing mentality, letting go of the need to feel like you're making it fair for everyone, and in those kind of contexts, because there are scenarios where, like, fair for everyone is the goal. But, in that kind of situation, it's like, it was not my problem that their manager didn't push for this thing for them. It's like, I can't worry about that. My manager has a very clear reason why this is important, so be it. And so it is really that comfort.
I'm curious for people who agree with you but still struggle with this. Do you have any advice for people who have a hard time letting go of the idea that they're gonna ruffle some feathers, just, like, accepting that, embracing that? Like, how do you let go of prioritizing everyone else's opinions of you?
I struggled with that. And the way that I started to overcome that was almost the approach of baby toe in the pool to check the water temperature kind of thing, which is, you may not necessarily go hard in this is what's right, this is what I believe, but sometimes it can be something as simple as asking the right question and leading people to your strong opinion without actually saying it. So being a consultant, I have lots of conversations. And so it's like, well, what if we did this way? What would be the challenge with that, or this, that, and the other? And then they'll say, and it's like, well, what if that weren't a barrier? Living in the hypothetical sometimes, and, depending on the situation of what you're trying to push for, there's different, tactics to use, but just sort of approaching it differently, almost a softer way. I still use what if sometimes because I recognize the person I'm talking to, it'll go further that way. But often, like now, I'm able to just say, okay, here's what I think we should do. And here's what, the future could look like if we do that. But it really is just finding that way to push yourself forward, to push your thoughts, your opinions, to make yourself heard in a way that is mildly comfortable for you initially until you're able to spread out. And I mean, I'd love to, as people are listening, I'd love to hear if they've solved this in a different way, how they've done that as well. Cause for me, it was very much like baby toe in. And once you start to see that nothing bad actually happened. Like, there might be a little friction for a moment, and then you come to a resolution, and it's not like, whoever you had friction with, like, hate each other forever. There was a little friction with me and the marketing managers. for a few weeks after I moved in the office, but then we were collaborative and they appreciated that when we worked together, they could come sit in my office and we didn't have to book a room and but didn't completely kill our relationship. And so that's kind of the other thing is once you try and assert yourself, when you see that nothing goes air quotes wrong, it becomes a bit easier for you to push more and more and more.
Absolutely. And it's such a good suggestion to lead with questions as a way of putting your toe in the water, especially because it also invites the other person in. It's not you coming into the room saying, I'm going to ruffle feathers. I'm okay with that. Here's my opinion. Boom, mic drop. It's inviting new ideas as a conversation and inviting people to let you know what makes them uncomfortable or where they think the issues are. That seems like such a great way of bringing big ideas to the table in a collaborative way and really making everyone a partner in making your idea happen.
Yeah, and something you said made me think about something else that I often do, which is broach the elephant in the room. And I'll actually say, what I'm about to suggest is going to ruffle feathers, or what I'm about to suggest is gonna make you feel uncomfortable, or what I'm about to suggest is gonna cause some panic initially, but hear me out. So sometimes it's making people apprehensive out of the gate, and then whatever I say is never as bad as wherever their mind went in that moment. And so they become a little
Right.
more receptive as well. And in some cases, when you know you've got a strong or contrarian opinion, it is like just going in, like, you're probably not going to like what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. Or you're not going to like this, but just know it's with your best interest at heart. Leading with that as well can also just put the uncomfortableness out there, and once you put it out there, people all mentally panic about what you're gonna say, and whatever you say is never that bad. And so then it's like, "Oh, well, maybe." And, they start to think about it and be a little more receptive. So that's another approach to being able to get comfortable in that space is just calling it out that you are in that space.
That's really smart. It's very disarming to just acknowledge how people are probably going to feel about it and also put out there, like, I have enough empathy to recognize that this is going to be a challenging idea, right? I'm on your side with this. I recognize this. That seems like a really good way to maybe turn down the volume on some egos or just some big fears or things because we can get so activated by
Yeah.
change and new ideas, and we can perceive things as threats that aren't threats. And I think that goes for all of us in different situations. So having somebody say, hey, don't put your walls up quite yet, but I am going to throw something tough at you.
Yeah.
That's really powerful.
So, yeah, those are kinda my 2 approaches.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and this great advice with us. I think so many of our listeners can relate to that experience, to the feeling like they've been holding themselves back to avoid ruffling feathers. And these are such great actionable tools to help people get over that with everyone on their team, really take people with them. Thank you again for sharing. It's so lovely to chat with you and to learn from
Well,
you.
thank you so much for having me.
Before we end the episode, we want to take a moment to reflect with you, our courageous listeners, about what Brandi's story means to you. Where would it be helpful for you to get comfortable with ruffling a few feathers? And how can you use empathy to diffuse tension? If today's show inspired you, tell us. Send an email or voice memo to hello@wednesdaywomen.org. Or keep the ripple going by giving us a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your ratings help us grow and inspire even more people. This podcast is brought to you by Wednesday Women, an organization dedicated to increasing the visibility of women executive leaders. Learn more at wednesdaywomen.org. Thank you to our executive producers, Melissa Moody and Leslie Greenwood. Again, I'm your host, Ashley Lobbs, hoping you'll keep the ripple going. Until next time.